background, I guess. Sweet. Well, thanks for coming. Some of you, I think, did you make it to the event yet? Yeah, that was today. So, very short agenda. So we're just getting started on communication with us. Stuart already asked this from us, why are we doing this? We're not sure. But I guess see back in the community, in a safe legal environment, learning, hacking, inspire and motivate, I guess, and selfishly, but we'll stop. Speed deal. No alcohol for this time. We're gonna try to get another menu, something and got masks required on the area. Got a space that we may be able to use little hackers right on the road. So the caveat there is we're masks at all times. Summer they don't require masks, and they are. Hopefully we can their own spaces that we're fun, but we can do it. This place. Legal stuff, thank you, Brian. We say, we have a proposal conduct, membership list in progress. We always have to design a logo. So if anybody has any background stuff. Well, guys, just getting started here. So, website is going to be tc6wave.org. Has some progress. I'm probably going to use WordPress. Somebody has any development skills. I'm trying to learn, like React or Angular, but it's not there yet. So we don't do anything. So, yeah. We are going to try to do a 5-month sponsorship at some point. The second guy is just trying to talk about the paid product on CD and into the sponsorship. I think the way that would work is, we can find other 501(c)s to sponsor us. If you go that route, we would just control the Discord. Thank you, Trent, for coming over to admin. Ellie's one of the cookies, but she's not going to go to her house, so if she actually takes or ran into, we'll fix it. CTF also trying to set up into that. Rules are on the Discord. Monthly meetings, for the monthly meetings open to the public. I think for now, until it's either Robbie or today. We want to do scheduled talks and kind of like open mic, type night, unless anybody else has suggestions. I do plan on bringing like doc picks, I brought some books. Got the new Red Team Field manual here. And happy guys, once it goes out. What else? Feel free to DM me or speak up now. What we look at the this group, we are going to try to, make it a member creative thing. And I think that's pretty much it. We give it over to Stuart.
Is there anything specifically you need for the next month?
The next month?
Someone to speak.
So next month, I'm actually going to do the building reporting action talk that I gave at IT Summit. I have those here, and we'll do a wireless, have some wireless access points, a web WPA2, that gear, maybe some 10 gears. And we do the, crack those or put you on the equipment. Walk through the whole thing. Then even that for someone else wants to talk. That's kind of like my back pocket thing. Just basically a little bit of vendors.
If you want to throw this together, people who could be on the back burner for presentations and also,
Yeah.
just like aside from other things.
Yeah, I'll start with the doc.
Yeah, we can just throw it to it.
Probably one there, yeah. Have something you want to see, or so put one on paper, if you accept it, you want to do a drive, kind of like, I know you've already given this talk, right? Yes. Yeah, you should use about 6 question, speaking, so, yeah, that's kind of the format, I can't remember exactly, they have Slack, well, they kind of covered the more social drinking scene, which is cool participating as well. But there wasn't like a more technical,
Like things not working, hanging out.
yeah, it really was.
Actual.
Yeah, they did some, talks, it was rare, and I had very good, so that's kind of.
Just go around the table and say like, what did you do today that's tech related?
Yeah. Both guys were great, it's from both, yeah, I think that's it. Well, guys, he said, I'm on mic as well, just, but I'm actually away from the laptop, but you should be able to hear Stuart, once he gets started, so. All right, any questions before we get started? All right, let's do it. Thanks for
So
coming.
we'll do a quick test. Is this mic volume better?
I'm trying to, oh yeah. Dan, if you could help me out, these would be good.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you, Ryan and Allie. Stuart McIntosh. I used to work at American Family Insurance for 17 years. Long enough that I felt like I died there a couple times. Mainly just about anything security defense related. So domain admin, manager, threat intel, SOC, threat hunt, whatever the buzzword was, that's what we did. And then I spun out and I started a consulting firm specializing in defense related stuff specifically. So now mainly we do Splunk development for SOCs and threat groups and stuff like that. Some medium-sized companies, some larger ones, anywhere around 100,000 to 350,000 employees, so pretty big global ones. So with that, so that's kind of the background of where this talk came from is essentially my experiences in how to help some of these organizations in a different way. So we'll kind of dive in. So today, the premise is threat hunting your SOC information, like your actual alerts, as opposed to your EDR alerts or network or the traditional threat hunting. So we'll just kind of baseline what I mean by threat hunting, because it seems like everyone has their own spin. Some of the benefits I've seen, and then hands-on examples. So you can copy them, send them, use them, however you want. And then some lessons learned based on me doing this and actually feeling some of the repercussions. So, by the way, feel free to interrupt, raise a hand. I'll repeat the question for people online. If it triggers a thought or a question, feel free to ask. Not a big deal. So threat hunting. Everyone has a vote, and apparently vendors get 2 votes because they're vendors and they can publish more than other people. The best kind of definition I found that kind of spoke to me was specifically proactively and iteratively searching through information. And the reason I really like that is the emphasis on proactive and the emphasis on iterative. I think some people forget both of those, but they still will call it threat hunting. So the premise here is, right now, what if we start rotating this, and instead of looking at endpoint logs or network logs, let's actually look at what's triggering alerts repeatedly or over time or spikes for different anomalies. And again, taking that proactive and iterative approach. That's kind of what the point of this is something that you can do once a week, just kind of scrub your information, see how things are changing. It also makes your leader or manager look really good because they're like, look at all these graphs. It's like, great, leave me alone. So some benefits. So first, strengthening controls. Not sure everyone's experience, but I've definitely been in kind of this gridlock with engineering where they'll turn it on in audit mode, but they'll never turn it on block mode because the earth will stop spinning until you can prove it won't. This is one of the ways that you can actually say, hey, look at this is what's happening. This is what might be prevented if you block this or put in this control. So we definitely see a lot of engineering teams get on board by saying, okay, this is enough evidence for us to do something about it. Another one, you'll see from some of the examples I have, analysts are not machines, they're humans. And because of that, they all make decisions differently. So you can literally give someone the exact same alert and they will close them in two different statuses. One will say, there's nothing wrong here. And the other one will say, oh, this is terrible. So by doing this type of kind of work around the SOC data, you can actually help smooth that out. So you can help kind of educate people and kind of stabilize what everyone's meaning is. For me, when I was an analyst, there was a coworker who found something malicious, and I said, whoa, I thought that was benign. What did you look at? He looked in an area on the computer I haven't been looking at, and he found an indicator in the registry. And I was like, well, we should probably add that to the list because I've been ignoring that this whole time. So it's just kind of that cross-sharing that can kind of help as well. And then finally, everyone wants to get rid of noise. So if we find things that keep triggering alerts, why don't we highlight that and get it fixed?
Can you give us an example for us to know what the traditional
Argument against what?
So presented an argument for a new form of just a different data source. No, different data source.
Yeah, I think it was just clarification around what I meant by threat hunting SOC data. And specifically, exact same cycles, exact same team, look for trends, look for anomalies. But instead of looking at raw data, we're looking at what was processed. So we're looking at either ServiceNow cases and how they were handled, or notables in Splunk, or if you have the Hive, any case management. Let's look at those logs about what cases are triggering and how are they being handled.
So additional forms of threat hunting would be that data then?
Yeah, binning it, stats, any group buys, and looking for outliers or looking for large cluster, like any of that kind of approach of, like if I'm given an unknown data set, web data, what's the first thing I do if I'm kind of hunting? I'll look for rare or super common. So I'll look for rare user agent strings or the most common ones. And I'll kind of go on both ends of the spectrum, kind of the bell curve, kind of head the middle and head for the edges. This is the same kind of thing. Yep. And maybe you'll see it by the searches too, where you'll see a pattern over and over of how we're doing the search and some of the results. And again, this kind of pivoting that we do, or counting and binning, you can do it with any data source. So yeah, if the technique itself is something that you find interesting, grab it, take it, make it your own. Another thing on that, I'll work with Ryan to get a PDF out of the slides, because with the searches, it's so much easier to copy paste them. So much easier. So I'll work with him to get a PDF for everyone. I don't have one of those fancy QR codes at the end for download these now. It's not a menu. We'll find a different way of getting it to you. I'm busy enough as it is. Like you'll see some of the stuff I step in. I'm busy enough as it is. Yeah. Oh, sorry. So this is a slide of one of the examples we'll step into. There's a format to these slides. The left is kind of documentation of it. The right is the search itself. You can copy paste it. It's built for Splunk Enterprise Security, but that little top pink note where it says notable, you can fill that in with any source of cases that you have. So if it's a log for ServiceNow, whatever it is like that, this just happens to be easy because it's in Splunk. But I realize not everyone has that. But we'll step through the search itself. And then I have an example as well, a screenshot that'll kind of show you the data put out by that search itself. So that's kind of the theme to it. This first one, remove noise. Let's look for repeated alerts. This one's super interesting. What we want to do is, so all of these, you'll see these. So I highlight what adjustments there are. So in this search, what are the toggles to turn to potentially change the results? And all of them have time frame. I really suggest looking at a minimum 7 days, because when you start looking at alerts, a lot of them are a result of user behavior. Well, user behavior traditionally in the US is the highest on Wednesdays and is the lowest Sunday night, because there's generally no patching or anything Sunday night. And so because of that, there's a seasonality curve with volume. And if you're trying to compare volumes of Sunday night to Wednesday, you're going to say, well, there's so many more events, something's wrong. No, it's just because users are actually working. That's all it is. So I try to look at it week over week. Some of this is different. So if you work with European companies, the summer is weird. It's almost as if the company doesn't exist, because whole groups of people leave for a month. And so you'll get like these huge drops in activity. So just be really aware of, like, in general, how the company operates. But anyway, so I try to pick at least a week, and I usually look at these data sets week over week for just to kind of smooth out those spikes. Specifically for this one, there is, towards the bottom, there's a count greater than 4. That count field is how many repeated alerts do we want to focus on. You can set it to 10, depending on how noisy you are. The point is, we're just trying to take the top portion that's manageable. So you can dial that up or down, depends on your environment. And then a fun one is duration. So it's actually the distance between the first alert seen and the last alert for that same person or system. What's kind of neat about that is you can say wherever the duration is less than 24 hours, that's just a heavy hitter. They're just always hitting it. Again, once a week. For this one, I'm actually not filtering on duration because I didn't need to. It was already low enough volume. So let's look at an example. So what does this mean? In this highly redacted version of this in a lab, you'll see 3 different systems here. The bottom 2 is 27 alerts and 17, and the top one's 153. This is what I mean about finding these outliers, or these really noisy ones. And specifically that top one, it's an external system. There's a lot of web traffic being seen inbound, as well as threat intel hits. This is usually the indicator that there's an unblocked malicious IP that's probably scanning you. We should really block this. What's funny is the analysts keep closing it malicious. Yep, it's bad. Okay, let's do something about it. And we'll see that later, where there's some analyst confusion. Here, there's analyst consensus. They're just not pushing it a little bit further to actually get it to stop. So again, I like this example just because everyone agrees, and yet they keep letting the behavior occur when hopefully there's something to stop it. Another thing you'll see admins just always hammering something, and the analysts will just keep closing it benign. No one will actually kind of work through, how do we filter this out? How do we stop detecting it? You really need to go a couple steps further with anything that's really high volume, just because it's where you're getting the fatigue from. Does this make sense? This kind of layout and example? Okay. Super similar search. Again, you'll see it's just over and over. We get all the cases, and then we grab the same set of fields, except what we're changing is this by field, where it's orangish yellow. That's what we keep changing between all of these, and then some filter down below. So in this case, we're actually going to look at the same data set again, all of our alerts for the last month. I think this one's for a month. And instead of sorting it by whatever triggered the alert, we're actually going to look at some HR information. So we're actually going to look at what department are they in, or what title do they have. The reason I flip between both, if you have call centers, I bet they all have the same title, but they won't have the same business unit because each one's probably segmented by what region they're operating or covering in. But on the opposite side, like security, they're all in the same group, but everyone has a different title. So that's what I mean by flip between the two, because you'll really catch different user groups. And again, it comes down to knowing the company you're in. So that's one of the big adjustments here, is know which one you're flipping between. For this one, for the example here, I went with title. So if I tried by business unit and it was super vague, so I went a little bit tighter onto the user's title. In this example, there were 8,900 alerts. I think this was in a month. Might have been a little bit longer. But what's interesting is the fact that we were able to group that number by what title it is. And for the people in the back, it's Infrastructure System Administration - offshore. And when you look at the detections or the rule names, you see endpoint alerts, long connections, data exfil, account password reset. So why does this matter? A, it's creating work on this analyst. B, I'm guessing no one's really stabilized what the procedures are for this offshore team. And I'm guessing they've kind of rotated some staff through. And so we like grabbing information like this, finding out who owns this relationship, whether it's in IT or in the business unit, and then working with them to say, listen, there's an undue burden being put on this entire company because of this. We need to work with someone to figure out how to get them to stop doing this. Either we need to adjust their procedures, or we're going to start enforcing bad behavior. Because the last thing corporate wants is when you start disabling the ability for the offshore people they paid for to do work. So it gets some attention rather quickly if you start disabling these accounts. And generally it's after hours as well. So that's the other thing here, is corporate may have no idea because they're all asleep when these alerts are firing, because they're working at a different part of the calendar. So what to do? Again, each one of these I would look at, because it's usually, the thing I highlight here is a collision between process and security technologies. They're usually asked to do something and they're following it, give or take 10%, but they tend to be following a script of some sort, and no one vetted that script by the security team. So it tends to just keep causing a trigger somewhere. There's also a lot of account reuse with these people. With this group of employees, there tends to be account reuse, where if someone's out, they're like, oh, that's fine, log in as that. And they don't know the password, so they'll trigger some of these or whatever. So it's a very fruitful basket when you start these conversations. Again, super similar search, except this time, let's look at what type of system. So the same way we said, okay, if this user is triggering a bunch of alerts, let's look at titles. Now we're saying for all the computers triggering alerts, let's actually look at what type of computer it is. So you can look at what company it came from. If you are a part of an organization that has several companies, you can look at, is it like what operating system, or what OS it has, or what functional role it has. Each one's kind of interesting. Again, it's in the adjustments, different things to think about that you could potentially pivot on or bundle, cluster on. And then sometimes with these like tags, like if you tag the system in a CMDB or something, sometimes you can get different priorities. So a domain controller and a Exchange server might have a higher priority. So we can adjust kind of how we respond to some of this. Another fun example as to why I can't make QR codes for you guys. There's a domain controller that has a bunch of alerts, and the analysts have been closing them both as benign and malicious. Thanks, everyone. It looks really bad. So excessive DNS, internal port 53 traffic. So someone's routing port 53 traffic around it, IDS, long connections, and threat intel. Can anyone guess what this domain controller was doing at this company? Microsoft DNS on top of AD. So common setup for certain organizations, but in a SOC, it looks terrible. But in reality, it makes sense functionally. Like, oh, okay, that's what's going on here. Again, it's one of those things where some education with whoever the domain admins are about, hey, maybe we should do some additional filtering before this machine's getting these requests. Maybe we can look at a different tool to do DNS instead of our domain controllers. All great conversations that you can have when you can present stuff like this to them and kind of show them, listen, you're adjacent to threats left and right. I mean, you're good right now, but are we going to count on that forever and ever? Or can we look at kind of rotating this? Another interesting one here, when we were doing this for another company, Mac laptops were just moving into the organization because it's cool. So they were just doling them out, even to people who didn't know how to use them. They would just, oh, here, you get one. You're new, here's a Mac. And so what happened was Macs accounted for, I think it's like 5% of the total assets in this organization, but it actually accounted for 35% of the alerts that the SOC was handling. And so when we brought these results to the desktop team and said, yo, we got to have a conversation here, it perked them up a little bit, because the last thing they wanted was to be on a metrics report that shot straight up to the board and through leadership. So you can find interesting trends here. Another one, on the business unit side that we found, data scientists, because they do data sciencey things, they download random things from GitHub all the time and they just run them. And so you'll tend to get a lot of security alerts from them. Again, you'll see it in that business unit one. If you do it by title and they'll say data scientist, you'll see this whole package of alerts that they all get. So just interesting things to see. And the last one's multiple indicators. So this one, we're looking at what types of alerts the system was throwing. So did it throw, so in this case, it threw some malicious ones. Oh, actually, they were, yay, SOC, they're all malicious, but it keeps happening. Please fix it. So again, this is an external system that's triggering a whole bunch of different style alerts. Some of them are based on risk score. Some of them are based on different attack phases. The point of this is to look at what all is it triggering? And also, again, we should really put in a more durable remediation for some of these. We see phishing attacks like this all the time, where they say, hey, we dealt with the phish. No, you deleted the email. That's not dealing with the phish. By the way, in O365, there's a bunch of foreign logins for that same user. That's what we mean by like full remediation. So it's good to kind of help them understand just how far the expectation is to fix something. Yeah, and you've got to be careful, because next thing you know, they'll just start disabling the CEO's account because they're like, I fixed it, a little too far. Like the spirit, a little too far. So yeah, just another different style. Again, all we're doing is kind of binning it by different places. That was it for examples. Questions? Yeah.
On the, like, essentially the type, when it talks about a long connection, is that just one that has, like, that are multiple points it's jumping across whatever it's connected to?
So that long connection is actually a long connection through the firewall.
Oh,
So I think for this one, it was anything over 6 hours.
Oh,
So
I see.
it's a long network connection. Yep.
Oh,
So it's holding tunnels open for 6+ hours. You would see that. What's weird is ServiceNow does this behavior. So their portal, so if you stay in their portal all day, it actually holds that connection the whole time. It's not dropping it and then reforming. It actually will just hold it. And so we actually got a bunch of those and had to filter them out.
Like you've been talking about and seeing where those are.
Yep, you'll see it over and over. And what you'll do is you'll see, oh, they're all help desk people. I wonder what they're in all day that everyone is triggering this. Let's look at what URLs are associated to it. Oh, it's all ServiceNow. Okay.
And why is it doing this? And see if that's something malicious or not.
Yeah, we try to, so forever in a day, you can dig into a single thing because like they all pick up scars and marks over time. So like every laptop has something weird installed on it. And half of it is usually installed by the company. And especially if they've been employed there more than 5 years. Oh, heaven forbid if you dig too deep into that. So what we look for is commonalities around the detection to say, okay, what do all of these have in common? What type of work are they doing? What type of role are they in? Because that helps us kind of narrow down what might be triggering this. Was a package pushed to them? Is there a type of work that they do that's triggering some of this? So
then are you starting to based on like work groups and that you start to directly work with?
yeah, you can. That's kind of the nice thing here is if you can attach to one of these kind of groupings, the same way you did a search for it, the detection team might be able to actually filter on it to say, hey, we're good with this.
Yeah.
We had some issues with, oh, bless them, Citrix admins. Like there's some weird stuff they do. Like it's just weird what their machines do to administer host machines, especially in a large environment where they want to automate everything. And that's what we used to catch all the time were IT engineers, like corporate infrastructure engineers, because in order to survive, they've had a PowerShell or script something, and they hand them down. It's like, hey, welcome to the team. Here's your package of scripts that we run, which is great, except if it trips over something that you do, you're always going to get hit by it. So yeah, so we'll put filters around like, well, it's just the Citrix admins again. You just have to be really careful though. So it's great because it's more durable, but what sucks is if someone steals their credentials, you're a little blind to at least that detection. So we try to be really sensitive to it.
Yeah, it's the more great, but you still have other factors.
It's great if you can get them to fix the behavior. Next best is I try to filter them out of one detection, but catch them another way. So I try to kind of be my own checks and balances of that behavior to say, well, if their account's compromised, what else am I going to see? Cool. So wrap up with some lessons learned. Step one, stick with it, especially in the beginning. Yeah.
Actually, what was the first example that you had that showed you that approach was correct?
I got me results. Like honestly. So yeah, actually here, it got me everything until I pushed it too far with these. So all of those benefits that you saw about like, we started actually hardening the network. And more than the network, we actually got them to put more stuff in block mode on the email proxy, on endpoints. They started being less afraid of turning it on because we had evidence. And because you already have these searches, have them block it, wait a week, run it again, show them the delta, and help them feel like they did something. I didn't do it, you did it. And so it gives them a little bit of this, all right, I'm a part of something here. The other thing, so we just dramatically started dropping the amount of threats we were seeing. We became a lot more sensitive to weird because we removed so much noise. Things got a lot more just tighter. And then you'll see it in pen tests and red teams because all of a sudden it's harder for them to maneuver. Not only because you're more sensitive, but because all of these hard stops are there. They're used to just kind of blowing past it. Like, yeah, it may trigger an alert, but as long as it runs, I'll just blow right past them. I won't even be on that system by the time they look at it. So instead of blowing red lights, instead we're putting up walls to say, well, you're just not even going to be able to run it. So good luck. So that's what started reaffirming. Let's keep doing this as a continual practice. But in the beginning, it sucked. Like it really sucked. No one would listen to us. No one thought it mattered. Even the analysts are like, whatever, I'm fine. It's like, no, let's do this. So we had to kind of go through a couple of these cycles to start showing wins. But after everyone got excited and said, hey, let's do more of this, leadership started saying, well, give us more results that we can tell the board about. It's like, okay. So we went full tilt and we wore out every single welcome we had with every engineer, because every day we would throw them 3 new things that we want them to change. And they were like, I'm going to need a project for that. We're like, we don't have projects. I'm like, well, come back when you do. So the way we kind of renegotiated with them is we bundled it by technology. So if the email team, we would say, hey, these 3 changes we would like to propose. Here's the bundle. Can you do it? And it was like 10 or less hours. And they were like, yeah, sure. We'll get to it when we get to it. Thank you. And then if we had more changes, we would not go back to them until they finished that grouping. And so what we did is just had a queue for every team. And as soon as they finished one order, we would kind of slide a new order in and never burn them out. So definitely kind of stick to that. Don't throw them a bunch of ad hoc things. You have to kind of make it make sense to them in their world. That's what worked best for us. And then consistent response of the analyst. Like, just make sure everyone knows what's meant by malicious or benign, or places to look on a system, or what to do when a fish comes in. So just that consistency. And the way you'll see this is you'll see these dramatic changes in fidelity, like how many true positives versus false positives. You'll see there's no rhyme or reason except by shift or whoever covered on call. All of a sudden you'll start seeing it kind of stabilize and everyone's on the same page. It also helps new people joining the team so that they know what's expected of them. You tend to get better documentation then, so that people who join can follow it and know what to do, instead of like, well, I'll feel my way through.
So how are you creating more of those responses alongside this? Having a knowledge share repo, or they're all going through kind of talking about how they're getting deniability versus denied?
Yeah, so the first question is, what are you guys following for these responses? If they've been audited, they tend to have playbooks or documentation somewhere that was there. And once a year, someone just adds an A so that it updates the timestamp for the auditors. Or there might be nothing. And so what we do is we just say, okay, let's start with whatever's the most common. It's usually external emails or phishing or external IP scanning you. Let's just pick something small we can all agree on. There's not a lot of gray. What are we going to use? What trusted resources do we have outside? Some people use URL toolbot or URL scan. Some people use abuse IP. It's fine. But as a team, let's pick which ones we trust. That way we say, okay, you looked at the places we trust, go for it. So it's kind of stabilizing what an investigation for that thing is.
So you let the team itself like basically build that together.
Yeah, I found don't hand them blank paper, because you never. I mean, if they make something, you're gonna make them feel bad because you fix a bunch. So what I like to do is kind of drop in ideas, like, hey, I would recommend this as a search on our network. I recommend this from the outside world. And then if it's all bad, here's what I would do to fix the bad. And if it's not bad, here's how I would file it to make sure that the engineers know this might be a false positive. Because if they don't flag them correct in these types of alerts, the engineers never know what might be noisy or generating a bunch of this. So we kind of walk them through, and we won't do everything at once. We'll just say, okay, if you get an external IP, just start there. Here's what I would do. And by the way, let's know what our company corporate external IPs are, because I have seen an analyst block the corporate IP, which is a whole nother mess of chaos. Yep. That's a quick way for the network team to remove any access you have in their environment. Yep. But it's those checks. So why did I get burned by it? I forgot to tell someone what our ranges were because I knew them because I was there for so long. So it's one of those where it's like, not till it happened, but then how do we prevent it from happening again? So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's all I've got. So I appreciate everyone for putting up with it, dealing with it. Questions, any feedback? Yeah, we kind of filtered a lot. The only other thing, I usually get asked, okay, what data sources should we start with or whatever ones you can get. But generally, most people have really good endpoint consoles these days that they can search. Like those have come a really long way. So I try to tell people, look at AD logs, sign-ins, web, and email, because with those three, you can spot a lot of interesting things. And of course, your alerts. Please get your alert logs in.
And so how do you start to normalize the data? Well, what the logs look like versus what they now to contextualize that data, or are you just doing week over week, month after month, trying to find all that? It's just, you know what I mean? You keep that-
Depends on how long you're allowed to store your data. A lot of places I'm at, 90 days is all they really need for like hot data or actively searched. But we do tend to produce monthly reports for leadership anyway. So that tends to be the archival of summarized information. If there's an incident, tend to kind of carve out the piece, bundle it, throw it somewhere. Glacier or S3 buckets and stuff like that are where I'm noticing large swaths of logs getting shipped. But most of the binning and stuff you see, I do it all on live data. Yeah, to look for the trends. That way I can run it whenever I want. And no spreadsheets. I try to keep it out of spreadsheets if at all possible. I'm not good at Excel. So awesome. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Had no trolls done, that's good.
Yeah, Dan, now's your chance. You can type a question, Dan, if you're still awake.
He's still there.
Somewhere in there. Somewhere in the ether.
Stop the call. He said, what's that?
Thanks, Dan. Do you want me to mute him or end this?
You can go ahead. I'm just gonna kill you immediately. That's all we really wanted was the
Okay.
talk, so.